So I'd like to just open the meeting. It's 1:30. This is the April 15th, 2021 meeting of the Town Council's Financial Oversight Committee. My name is Jim Broderick. I'm this year's chair. And in attendance is Kathy Hill and Chris Solnier and Tom O'Connor and Rich Fricero. Also joining us are Mary McNally and Steve Lonergan, and special guests, Chief Williams and Chief Morissette. And obviously Don Mackey is monitoring us. I would just say that I would just ask if anyone is recording the meeting other than LCAT. All right, hearing none. And I will also just say that this meeting is being held via Zoom in accordance with the governor's orders of March 16th of 2020. Next order of business is to review and approve the minutes of our April 8th meeting. And Kathy, you had sent us the minutes. I only noted one comment, or mainly kind of like a technical correction that came through. And other than that comment, were there any other additions or corrections that other members noted and felt that were required to be changed on the minutes?
Yes, Jim, thank you. Chris caught a typo where the wording said health department feed, and it really should have said health department fees. So I caught that, and as you just mentioned, where it says members present at the top, I've changed that to present and denoted Mary and Steve's titles as town manager and director of finance, and also indicated they are non-voting.
Okay. All right. Yeah, somehow health department feed sounds a lot better than fee to me, but in any of them.
Less expensive.
With those changes, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes with those two changes as noted?
So moved.
Sure. I'll move to approve the minutes of the Finance Oversight Committee meeting of April 8th as amended.
Second.
And who was the second? Chris, you were Chris. Yeah. Great. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, we'll do a roll call. Kathy?
Yes.
And Chris?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that's approved. Thank you very much, Kathy. And thank you in advance, Rich, even though I know you're trying to squirrel your way out of it. Okay. Hi, Michael. Welcome. And we just came to order, and with a couple of very minor changes in the minutes, have approved the minutes. So we're basically just ready to start the meat of the meeting. So I don't believe you've missed anything material.
Well, I apologize too. I certainly don't want to hold anyone up, but I can at least have Mary attest to what we've been doing. So
Yes, she did mention that you had just left her office. So so the next order of business for us is really discussions with the police chief, the fire chief, and the finance director about the positions, the new positions that they've requested. Mary, I will leave it to your discretion. Who you'd like to, what batting order you'd like to have someone either start. So it's I'm kind of neutral on that. So whomever you would like to have start, please.
Well, I think Steve might be the quickest. So that would be my suggestion. And then Paul or Mark, you don't have to stay tuned if you think you could occupy your time better for the next 15 minutes or so. I mean, you're welcome to stay, obviously, but you don't have to listen to the other presentations if you want to decide between yourselves who wants to go next after Steve.
I'm the junior guy, so I'll defer.
That means junior guys go first. I don't mind. I'll go first.
What's that, Paul?
I'll go after Steve if and
Okay,
Mark.
all right.
Geez, I
How's
was glad
that?
everybody wanted to hear what I had to say.
And Jim, I sent my little diatribe also, so I don't need to be deferred any longer. If you are ready for me, I'm ready for you.
Well, we'll see what the time frame looks like, Mary.
No problem.
Thank you. We did notice that we got it in, and I thank you for that. So Steve, you did have a memo that you had provided to Mary and was shared with us. Anything you want to add to that or highlight?
I think the biggest thing to highlight is that this is to help the town. It's part-time. It's in essence, a pilot program. I was speaking with Tom Scanlon, who's our outside auditor, and he's like, I wholeheartedly agree that you should do this. Ratings agencies, in my experience, first thing they ask, what are your financial policy? What are your internal controls? An internal audit position or even temporary would help. And I think at the end of FY22, you'll see what a value it brings to it. Everything else I have listed there, we have audit findings about our policy, areas concerned, such as, deficits for free cash can be addressed during the year, and controls will help address them and make sure everything goes smoothly. I just think it's kind of like preventive maintenance. Having someone to help you do that enables you to make sure that you don't have a big problem down the road.
Questions for Steve? Yes. Oh,
I have a question.
I only have one
hang on a
question.
second. Sorry, Chris, I didn't see your hand before so Tom and then Chris, sorry.
Okay, Steve, one question, that is, the position is on a trial basis and it's part-time?
Yes, we've only allocated $25,000 for it because I think I'm going to start with a small thing, probably finance division, and have them cover what we do and our internal controls, et cetera. Then I'll make a presentation to Mary and eventually the council about how this is what we found, et cetera. And then we can go from there for next year to see if it's worth having a larger presence.
Right, there's another question that has to do with that, which is it's being part-time. It's my understanding it has to be below 20 hours.
20 hours or less, yes.
Is 20 included or is 20 excluded from the part-time?
I believe it's 20 or less, so up to 20. Now, the other thing is the position that we're looking for, I'm calling it part-time because it's not, you're not going to get anybody for $25,000 a year. So they can, and once the 25,000 is done, it's on hold at that point. So that's why I'm expecting an average of roughly 20 hours a week, give or take.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Chris?
That answered my question already. Thanks.
Okay,
Preemptive, I like that.
2 for 1.
Sorry, Steve, I'm taking notes. Are you saying that once the $25,000 expended, that's the end of the position at that time?
It's the end of funding for that position, so I have no budget item for it to pay for it. So I'd either have to come in front of the council and ask for additional funds or make a pitch to have it become a permanent at that point. So, but it's for 22, it's budgeted at 25,000 total.
Thank you, sir.
So I did have just a couple of questions, Steve. And thank you for sharing with me the FY20 audit management letter. And number one, congratulations to you and Mary and the town staff for having a report that has no material deficiencies. But obviously they did note a number of items that to deal with and that you're addressing. But it seemed to me that a lot of those items were really stuff that was work to be done. And I guess my question for the position is, as an internal audit position, this position really wouldn't assist your staff in getting work done. It's really aimed at looking at what you're doing and suggesting more correct ways of doing it?
Well, actually, Jim, it could be both. Truthfully, I don't mean to be like circumventing this question with this answer, but you're right. Generally speaking, they're making sure the way we do it follow the rules and follow laws and accounting principles and all the good stuff that will put most people to sleep in a matter of seconds. However, they also, another service that we'll provide is, right now, if we have a question on, is this right, is this wrong? We have to call the outside auditor, hope we get a hold of him, hope he's not busy at this time of year, which is he's always busy. And if someone was here, we could go to them and say, does this make sense? You know, I'm thinking I want to do it this way. They're a great source of information. It'd be a great, almost like a consultant, for lack of a better term, where they could come in and say, listen, don't even call anybody about this because you can't do it, or yes, you can do it this way, which again alleviates problems down the road because we don't do it for a full year and then have an outside auditor come in and go, yeah, that was all wrong. And now you just have no time to correct. So it really can be both, but they have a consulting aspect to them in the fact that they are not part of, they're not like a payable.
Right. I mean, they're not actually going to process payroll for
No.
you, or pay assistant procurement. They would be telling you, here's how you may want to tweak how you deal with procurement, et cetera, right?
Yes, and then honestly, the biggest benefit to me with this first year of this, if you will, if there are more than 1 year, is that it'll help me get the policy and procedures memorialized. We're very lucky as a town that our staff does everything really well and does it by the books. But there's nothing right now written down that says this is the policy. And that flows into rating agencies, because that's the first thing I always ask to see is the financial policies and to make sure that we're following them and that we have sound financial policies in place. Again, very lucky we have a good bond rating. I think it can get better. And I think this is one aspect of the way of getting it better.
So do you foresee this position also reviewing staff work in terms of its compliance with policies?
I envision an audit plan eventually, that they'll come up with an audit plan and say, in March, we're going to look at accounting and make sure they're following they'll do a test, and they'll come up with a whole audit plan of what they're going to test and how they're going to do it. Another example would be cash, make sure it's turned over properly, make sure it's reconciled, et cetera, that kind of thing. Almost a preliminary audit before our year-end audit. So that will make our year-end audit go a lot smoother. And as we know, do the actuarial stuff. The 19 audit was done when I got here, which was a year after it had ended. And this will help ease that so that doesn't happen again.
Finally, I don't mean to go crazy on this, but is this, it strikes me as a type of work that is overseen, recommendations are made, and then they're done, at least for, a period of time. And maybe, another year they come in and look at it again to determine whether there's new things that need to be reviewed. Is that how you see that position?
I see the position as being someone that comes in, and it's not going to be 15 people. It's going to be one person that comes in and takes a look at accounting till they have their audit of accounting done. Then they write up a report, sit with me, and kind of go through it. Then they move to collectors. So it'll be a rotating basis. So by the time the year is over, they're back rechecking and just making sure we're still following the stuff.
All right. So, all right. I see what you're
So
saying.
it's ongoing, but each individual audit, that's why in theory, if it was a full-time position, each year at the beginning of the fiscal year, they would come up with an audit plan saying, this is what we plan to do for the next 12 months.
Yeah. And final question, is this something that you might foresee actually having as a contracted service, or something from a firm for specifically doing this type of stuff? It sounds like a fairly specific expertise.
Yeah, it's fairly specific. There are people that are certified as internal auditors. A friend of mine who's a CPA is a certified internal auditor, and said that test was much harder than the CPA exam. So it's a highly qualified field. I would prefer, if given my druthers and I hit the lottery, would be to have it become a position within the town as opposed to a contracted position. And then just because they'll learn the town and it won't chance of turnover or contracts ending, et cetera. And so that would be my goal if it works out. But again, I'm a big believer of proofs in the pudding. If we can come back to you and show you that this project has, in fact, or this person has in fact saved the town some time, effort, for example, improved our bond rating as a result of stuff they found, or improved the audit, the management layer, which you're right. And the staff here they've done wonderful jobs on this, for the management letter. But if we can clean up and get no findings, for example, then it's kind of paid for itself. And I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
That was all I had. Rich?
Steve, real easy question. Where it's part-time, do you see this person working like starting in January, or how are you going to spread the part-time out? Just a clarification on that.
Well, first I'm hoping I get approved, and then after that I would have to see what time and see who you have to get someone and see what their schedule would be. So there's a search time, a meet with the person and the qualified person that you want to have do it, see what their schedule could be, and kind of map it out that way.
Okay.
Jim, could I add something? I'm sorry, Chris first.
Yes, Chris, go ahead.
Through the chair, Steve, what is our current bond rating?
It's a AA+.
Not too
And-
shabby.
No, it's not. That's like I said, I'm not criticizing that at all. It's actually a very good rating. And just so everybody's aware, during the pandemic, when one of the last ones I did in Springfield, they said they cut the outlook. They have, the rating, and then there's always the outlook. There's always a caveat. And Springfield's got dinged a little bit, the outlook, not the rating, but the outlook, because they might someday possibly have to go into their reserve because of the pandemic, which no one saw coming. So it was really a weird thing to say. So when I came here and we were doing our bond rating in November, I was expecting that because it seemed like they were doing that to everybody. And when we were done, they left everything the same. The outlook as well as the rating stayed stable and stayed the same. So that's a big testimony. I view that as, in fact, our bond council said the same thing. They view that as a step up because a lot of people have gotten, again, just the outlook downgraded. So we do a great job here. It really is the financial policies and the financial the financial leadership from Mary on down is good, and it's very good, and we have great people working for us. So I don't want people to think otherwise. This just is a way of making sure we stay the path that we're on.
Okay.
Thank you. Mary, Chris, did you have a follow-up?
Just wanted to make two quick points. The reason that we've characterized this as a pilot is because we don't know the ultimate return on the investment, so to speak. We do know that the finance department is still in a deep hole, and Steve and Olga and Allison are trying desperately to dig out of it. And I personally see this position as a way to help them accomplish these memorialization of policies, streamline some of our procedures, correct some of our missteps. And the cherry on top is that it's funded by savings in 4 other positions. So yes, it's a new expense in finance, but we have $58,000 of salary budgeted in fiscal 21 in department head line items that is not being used this year. So that's my internal rationale for where this money comes from. So it's essentially, as I view it, kind of a no cost improvement in finance. And maybe it'll only be a 1-year thing, I don't know. But if we get the return on what we think we'll get out of this position in this time, we'll be in much better shape.
Any other questions for Steve or Mary? Okay. Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
So who said, who was going next? Okay. Age before beauty, is that the?
Whoa,
Wow.
wow.
Does that make
Think
I
sense?
know.
seniority,
You know,
think
sometimes
seniority would have
come
some
out of my
kind of weight
mouth
around
before
here.
I remember that we're being recorded for posterity. My apologies, Paul.
That's all right. That's all right. I guess the questions are based on the deputy fire chief's position. My new position that I'm requesting again this year. I didn't do it last year. I withdrew it last year before I actually submitted the budget. I didn't feel it was the right time. It was even prior to COVID. I think there was a lot going on in the town, and I didn't want to throw that expense out there. And quite frankly, I couldn't move as much into the ambulance fund as I thought I'd be able to last year. So I kind of removed it. The year before I put it in, I met with you folks, the committee back then. It was favorable, but it wasn't, ultimately it was decided not to go forward with it that year. And so I came back this year. We had a really good, busy year with the ambulance. Revenue is up. Like most communities around. The difference for us is it's new revenue for us, where most of the communities around us are actually seeing less revenue because of COVID. We can't go after that CARES money for lost revenue because all our revenue every month is higher than it was the previous year. The ambulance is doing really well. This month, I think, is going to be our highest revenue month ever with the ambulance. But with that said, the department, everybody knows the department's 75 or 150% bigger than it was. And I went from 7 career guys. Now I got 22 career firefighters, or 23 with the inspector. The management piece of it is pretty lengthy. It's a never-ending job. 22 firefighters, 22 personalities, 22 schedules to manage and to deal with. My admin assistant, she's been pretty constant right now with the ambulance billing piece of it, going back and forth. We have a bunch of grants that we're managing internally here. The emergency management piece, I can't imagine if we still had a part-time emergency management director like we had, or a volunteer emergency management director like we had several years ago. It's just nonstop. Early on in the pandemic, it was not, we were just always in meetings. Now it's just back and forth, FEMA, MEMA, getting the grant money, the CARES money. We just, today we got our money that we were expecting, $330,000 to help cover some new costs that are all CARES related and COVID related. But the deputy would be, my goal would be to have the deputy primarily fire related, with a little bit of emphasis on the EMS piece of it. I have an EMS coordinator and an ALS coordinator that work shifts that kind of manage that piece of it. Maybe in the future, more responsibility will roll into the deputy, but at this point, it's a position that would help me free up more time for me to do the stuff that the policies that need to be updated. I mean, the last year, the only policies I wrote were COVID related policies. And he would probably handle the day-to-day, as it says in the job description. And day-to-day responsibilities would fall on him, which would allow me to work more budget-wise, more policy-wise, and more personnel management style stuff. I don't know if there's any questions directly related to it.
Questions for the chief? Tom?
Paul, would be an administrative or leadership position and not part of the union?
It'd be out of the union, right? This has already been negotiated. I'm not sure if it was the last contract or the contract before. If the town were able to fund the position, it's understood by the union, it's a non-union position. So we don't have to go back to the bargaining table and talk to them about running it. Who would fill the position? My goal would be, I have 4 captains, all very qualified. It would be a great step for them if they ever aspire to be a fire chief, or actually take my position in a few years down the road. So it's a non-union fire management position, right? And they would have some management authority over, where right now, if I have a discipline problem and I bring a captain in supporting me, he's also a union member. it gets kind of squirrely. We've had issues in the past where it's somebody that's their union member, but they're working on the discipline side. And anybody that's in a management role can understand that sometimes that creates a little bit of awkwardness, uneasiness, confusion, and ultimately it could turn around and bite us later on.
Other questions for, yes, Rich?
Yeah, Paul, I'm just looking for an intuitive answer to this. In reading this, I captured very well what you were talking about. But for you, you did touch on this a moment ago. How's it going to make you a better fire chief? What is it that it's going to give you the chance to do that you really need to do?
It's gonna help me mentor my officers better to get them ready to move forward. If they do decide, at the past year, I've actually had 2 of my captains. One worked on the ambulance budget that was submitted, and one worked on the fire budget. They don't do the day-to-day managing the budget. That's myself and that's Carrie. The 2 of us kind of do that. But I'd like to be able to roll some of that over to them so they can be ready. It'll also help me finalize. I was really doing well with the fire SOPs and SOGs and policies. But again, during the past year with so much going on and that changeover from having 7 guys to 20 something guys, it's been difficult to actually stay focused. Anybody that works on policies and procedures, you can't work on it for 10 minutes and they get sidetracked by something else. You got to really put your head to it. And same thing with all the grants we've been managing. You write a grant, you can't work on it for 10 minutes and then get pulled somewhere else. So this will help me fine tune some of the projects I got going.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Yep.
Kathy? You're on mute, Kathy. Happens to all of us.
Sorry, I'm working off an iPad today instead of my laptop, and the buttons are in the wrong spot for me.
Yeah, that's true.
Chief, this is a hypothetical. Were you to be able to promote from within one of your 4 captains, let's say, would you, going forward after that individual becomes deputy chief, do you see yourself filling the vacant captain position, or you just allowing that individual to step up and move forward with 3 captains?
No, because it wouldn't work. He would, at that point, you're not truly a line officer anymore. You're more a command position out front. So I would have to promote within, which I have about 5 really good acting captains right now. Every group has an acting captain, and actually some of them have 2. So as far as quality moving up, I do have some potentials there. It would require us to replace the bottom position, another firefighter at that point, if we hired within. And I'm not opposed to, depending on how many people applied, to make it a fair and equitable posting or position. If we had 1 or 2 people apply and we wanted to make sure we had the best opportunity, we could open it up outside. There are quite a few departments out there where guys have, when you put a deputy on, well, I don't know. And I don't know if it's going to be an outside job or not. So, but.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for, yes, Tom?
Paul, this position is going to be a new, or actually, it's an older position that's being replaced. In the past, we had a deputy chief. As you stated, you have 5 frontline captains who are responsible for responding to various situations in town. Would there be a need for additional training that would go along with this deputy chief's position in a more of a command role, or do you see that as just he's going to fit right in?
There is all the officers now are certified fire officer 2, which is basically just below deputy chief. The training at the academy has not opened back up since COVID. And the good part about that is it's all free training for the town. I would recommend whoever takes the position goes for it's the chief fire officer class. It's a 1 day a week class for 10 weeks. It's and touches every part of management and operation, from budget to SOPs, writing SOPs, and the hiring process. It is something, but if that person is scheduled Monday through Friday, which is my plan, there's no overtime and there's no cost involved in that. It's a course that's offered in the Springfield Fire Academy. So yeah, there is some additional training, and the person moving into the captain's role after that person moves up, there is training for that, but most of the guys have started that process already on their own. It's part of our promotional process. If they want to go for it, they have to have certain steps in place already. So training for that piece, and a lot of these guys, just because of the past year, the way things have been with time off and people out, have done a really decent job as being officers, acting officers. So I'm fully confident that position is going to be an easy one to fill. It'll be competitive. There'll be I think there'll be a few people going for it, but yeah.
Chris.
No questions for the chief. I just want to thank him for the great job he's done through this whole pandemic.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Working with the Board of Health and providing for local clinics. I can't say enough how proud I am of the good work you've done.
Thank you. We
Absolutely.
got an excellent team that we all work well together with. Yep.
Yeah.
Tom.
Paul, I have one just a follow-up question. The ambulance fund continues to grow, and this position would be partially or fully funded from that fund?
I didn't put any of this position through that. I was trying to be overly cautious with the fund, the ambulance fund, not to overestimate what I could budget for next year. That's something Mary and I could discuss with Steve before finalization of moving some of this over to that, a certain percentage of this position over. Right now, none of it's there. It's probably not a bad idea because the revenue stream is higher than I expected. So possibly moving some of that over and lessening the fire budget. Right now, the fire is down from the previous year. And that's my goal, to keep that going in that direction. It's going to steady out at some point, but if we can not see increases, that's ultimately then the system's working.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
So I have just a few questions, and just to dovetail on Tom's question, Chief. It looked like you're projecting the shift over quite a bit of firefighter salaries and expense from the general fund budget to the ambulance fund budget. And so even though your salary and your proposed deputy chief salary and the general fund overall, the general fund budget for salaries in the police, in the fire department actually is going down, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So I appreciate the ability that you have between those two areas. Certainly the ambulance has not only provided a lot more service to residents, but generated a whole nother way of supporting services. So do you, at some point, would you be allocating, I assume you supervise, and the deputy chief would supervise ambulance related items or functions as well?
Right. If he's supervising the on-duty crew, he's supervising the paramedics, he's in the EMTs, and everybody but a couple members actually cross-staff all apparatus. So they're either on the ambulance that day or they're not on the ambulance. They rotate back and forth. So it is, ultimately, we could justify covering, pieces of that salary with the ambulance fund. Again, I tried to be cautious and not predict or project too much of the budget or the revenue that we're.
So you're trying to balance against the projected revenues and the.
Right. I don't want to. I'd rather say, we're going to do this and we do it, and then have some extra, than as opposed to say, but I'm pretty confident now. I mean, we're nearing the end of the year. I'm pretty confident now that we're going to do well, a lot higher than I projected. But and I guess that's a conversation that Mary and I and Steve can have if we want to, tweak our numbers, move some from one to the other, and save a little more money on the fire side.
If I read this correctly, the proposed amount that's charged against the ambulance fund this year is going to go up like $500,000. Is that
Yes.
roughly correct? Do you when you said at some point it's going to level out, is that what you're referring to? That it may not be $500,000.
Right. We're not going to see such a large increase every year.
Right.
Our revenue's gotta slow down at some point. We're not going to continually raise revenue. We do pull in more than Longmeadow. We do pull in a little more than Wilbraham. Right now we're up about 150 calls over Longmeadow for the year, which ultimately comes down to revenue. I mean, we have 3 nursing homes, 2 assisted living facilities, and an independent facility in town that it's the morning wake up call for these guys.
Yeah.
And in our general population, it's a pretty busy town.
Final question, and I had a little trouble with the nomenclature. We have I'm looking at an exhibit that was supplied to us regarding the ambulance fund, and the last line says net profit or deficit, but it shows a projected net profit or deficit, and I believe it's a cumulative. So I'm kind of equating that to the ambulance fund balance of almost $800,000. And I was just wondering if that's true. Is there a use that you have in mind in terms of the balance in the ambulance fund?
I don't see that number on mine. I think that might have been updated with Steve submitted everything.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
We have, I don't know that off the top of my head, there shouldn't be a large balance per se. You might be looking at so the revenue for this year, we can't spend until next year, till it's appropriated and passed in the budget. I have my budget for this year, which was already approved, and then the town council approved a little bit more back in December to increase staffing a little bit and help cover some costs due to COVID. But that 800,000 is probably, if I can look real quick, if you give me 2 seconds, I'll pull up my file, could be the revenue that we pulled in for fiscal this year, fiscal 21.
Well, no need to answer it on the fly. What I can do is I'll make sure I show Steve and Mary the form I'm looking at, and they can send you a copy of it. And I may just be interpreting it incorrectly, but it's something we can just clarify. I was just curious if it were a balance, whether there was a use in mind for it. But I may be misinterpreting what that number means entirely. So why don't I do this? I'll send the sheet that I'm referring to Steve and Mary, and then they can forward it to you. And and unless they know that I'm totally wrong right off the bat.
That may be just the funds that were collected this year that's unappropriated yet, and those are the funds that I'm banking on to appropriate for next year.
All right, so I'll do that. I'll send it along, and if there's still a question, they'll forward it to you, and I'm sure there's a good answer to it. Any other questions for fire? If not, Rich, yes.
Yeah, just to compliment Chief, It's always a pleasure to see your staff in the emergency room at Bay State Medical Center. They're very professional, they're very outgoing, so it's always a pleasure to see them.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Good luck, Mark.
Well done as always. So, Chief Williams, don't have to ask who's next.
Okay. Chief Morissette's going to be a tough act to follow. But really, as he was sitting there talking about his needs, it was like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. So ditto on a lot of the things he said for the need for his position. I understand, hopefully, that you've seen the letter I sent Mary, kind of outlining my thoughts on the lieutenant's position here. Both the need to have a lieutenant in general, then plus, the benefits of and the preference of having it be a new additional position. I do recognize that is a big ask, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions here today, because I get it. I know that's that is a big ask for the new guy to come along in a tough budget year to walk in and make a request like this. But really, in coming here and seeing the operation and how things are structured, it just it struck me as an immediate need, and it was something that before I even accepted the job, and when Mary and I were talking, about what some of my ideas might be, she shared her thoughts on things here, and that came up pretty quickly on both of our lists as an identified need for the department. Really, I feel like the crux of the issue here is having it be an extra position, and really you see what I wrote there, and I'll be happy to answer more specific questions or expound on that if you like. Since I've written that letter, I've actually found out a little bit more about the reform bill and some of the expectations coming down from there. There's still a lot of unknowns. That the post commission has just been announced and formed. You may have seen that announcement. We're still waiting for specific guidance to come down on certain things, but just hearing some of the additional oversight measures that are coming into place as of July 1st of this year, it just really reaffirms my belief that I need some help here at the command level, and this lieutenant would largely function like Chief Morissette's request for his deputy chief, very similar in responsibility, and an executive or a command level position as opposed to what I would call a supervisor level position, which in our case is the sergeants here. This position would be more of a command level thing. This would be somebody who would be somebody for me to mentor, somebody for me to train, prepare for my job. If and when, whatever time that may come open, it's my strong desire and intent to have my replacement come from within this department whenever my time comes to, when the town chooses to separate me or I choose to separate from the town, whichever comes first. It really, I think, a big part of my responsibility here. And again, this was another thing Mary and I talked about, which really helped me feel comfortable about coming here, was our mutual desire to, for my job to really be a mentoring role for other supervisors and hopefully future leaders and chiefs within this department. My preference in being able to get this as a new position is because if I can keep 6 sergeants, that really functionally works best for us. My hope, we really need 5 sergeants on the patrol side to give consistent 24/7 round the clock sergeant on every shift supervision. So you need 5 out of the 6 just to fill those holes. And then there's a little bit of a slight overlap in there on 2 out of 6 days. on one shift where you can have 2 sergeants, but that can help you with some overtime buffering too when one of those sergeants is absent. And then my preference would be, if I can keep that 6th sergeant, that would allow me to have that sergeant really provide more hands-on oversight for our investigations bureau. My intention is to expand what we currently have for detective services and that we offer. I think right now, I don't think I think we're a little bit undermanned in that department, and I think largely have one person doing most of the work right now. I'd like to get some assistance in there, and so with that 6th sergeant, I could have that person oversee the investigation side of the house, and that would also assist me in getting more effective, more help in there, and hopeful future, I'd like to add another position in there eventually. Not new position in the budget, I mean, from within my existing personnel on the investigation side. Create some opportunity. We have some, very young, ambitious officers here who, are looking to expand their, horizons and get into that part of their career too. My vision for the lieutenant is, I largely see it as functioning like I did it in my former job in Greenfield. I was the deputy chief, and I really, this department's a little bit smaller than Greenfield, but not that much smaller. And I really could see that lieutenant functioning like I did as a deputy chief in Greenfield, which really ideally puts the chief position in a more, front-facing with town hall and town officials, outreach meetings, connecting on the government and dealing in budget management and oversight, dealing with that side of the job and being able to focus on that. And then if I had the lieutenant could really focus on the operations, which is really, like I said, how I was doing my job in Greenfield. My chief was the face with City Hall, with City Council, was very hands-on the budget management side of things. And I was left to run the department operations, patrol and investigative, and that was my focus. And I think that really works well. And so that would be my hope with this lieutenant here. They could focus on operations side of the house, things that I think as chief pay as much attention to necessarily, and give it better attention. It would also give the sergeants a more effective level of supervision first over themselves that right now, I'm the next report up from the sergeants, and that just really isn't good. The sergeants deserve a more involved supervisor, somebody who can better meet their needs and address issues than the chief can. So that is kind of in a nutshell what I'm hoping for with that position. I guess I should address too, which may come up in questioning about union versus non-union, things like that. I have talked to the union about it. I believe everybody's in agreement that there's a need for the position. I don't think there's any, I don't think there'll be any challenge on that. However, the union, did make it known to me that if the position is to be a non-union position and it is to come out of an existing union position, meaning, yes, you can have a lieutenant, but it's not going to be a new position in the department. You're going to have to find it from within your 6 sergeants. It's going to be one of them. If it's going to be a non-union position, which is for the same reasons Chief Morissette shared, I really, for the integrity of internal investigations and for the ability to act as a department head in my absence and have, certain conversations with other department heads and Mary, in my stead, I really would prefer this position to be non-union. The union did make it known that, they will oppose, removing a union position to make non-union. I don't think that's a surprise. I don't take offense to that. I understand from the union perspective why they would make that argument. So that is, again, that's another reason why I think, though, yes, it's costly I won't deny that. I do think it would make the transition to that position smoother. The union did agree with me that if this position is a new additional position and it is made a non-union position as a new additional position that doesn't exist now, they agreed, we have no fight. There's nothing for them to argue about in that place. So I do think it would make it easier to get that position going. I did have discussions with them too about civil service versus non-civil service in that position. And really at this point, I don't, I think I can make it work either way, whether it's a civil service position or not. That's of less importance to me than being an additional position or a non-union position. I think the process that I'd like to use to fill the position will meet civil service regulations. So if we choose to have it be a civil service position, that's fine. I think it'll just involve me doing more paperwork and waiting for more bureaucracy to approve it out in Boston, because that rank does not currently exist in the department. So I'd have to get approval from civil service, and there's a series of things I have to go through to do that. But I could do that if I have to. Yes. So I guess I've talked long enough. Is there any question?
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. Questions for Chief Williams? Yes, Tom.
Mark, the position itself is it crossing shifts, or is it going to be first shift work only?
With just one position, I would see it as a admin schedule, Monday through Friday, day shift or something similar to that, similar hours to mine. Doesn't necessarily have to perfectly line up, but yes, I see it primarily as an admin type business hour position.
Through the chair, one more question.
Yes, go Tom.
As we mentioned when we were talking to Paul, in my opinion, I'd like to see the position filled. If we approve it from within, it sets a good structure for the town going forward to show that there's opportunities for promotion, opportunities for advancement within the current structure. And in my opinion, whether it's fire or it's police, it improves morale to the extent that people aren't pigeonholed forever.
Yes, and thank you. Absolutely. My full intention is to, an expectation, I will fill this position from within. I think we have a number of qualified candidates for that. And like Chief Morris had shared, I have had people from the outside inquire as to if a position like this were to ever come in place, would I be interested in having them join my team? And I've politely declined and said, no, I thank you for your interest, but my future leaders are here already. So I'll be promoting from within for certain.
Rich, you're on mute. Yeah.
Chief Williams, just a question about staffing. I understand there's 27 positions, and we have one in the academy right now, and we're looking at hiring another one to go into the academy, correct?
Correct. That's correct. We have one in the academy now. We have one unfilled vacancy at the moment. We're doing background investigations on 2 potential candidates who are on our civil service list now. And then we are expecting a couple of retirements that have been announced already that are happening later this year. So by the end of 2021, we'll have 2 more vacancies. So I really think, depending on the availability of the next police academy, after this one, assuming the candidate we have in there now makes it all the way through, and I think he will. He seems like a really solid kid. We'll have the other position we're hiring for now, and then if another academy hasn't started in time, we may have 2 more vacancies by then. So realistically, we're at least a year away from having, all of our positions filled again. At least a year.
Just 2 points. One, I'm being humorous. Kathy and I probably know most of these candidates in the present police force, so I almost feel like you'll be a Boy Scout leader. They're so young, most of them. And secondly, with this process you talked about, overtime is going to be impacted, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I get, can you clarify the question overtime?
Well, because you don't have your full 27 patrol officers all because of the shifting with the academy. So it is going to impact overtime on our budget.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's easier to get down below your shift minimums and when you don't have as many people to choose from. And my hope is once we are back to full staffing, hopefully nobody else unplanned leaves. Of course, I worry in this current climate about people just giving up on this job.
Yeah.
This isn't for me. Besides recruiting new people, that's the next crisis that's coming our way, by the way, in my opinion, just assuming everything stays stable, assuming we can fill all our positions. Once we're fully staffed up to where I'd like to be, that's when I'm really hoping I can expand some other things like our detective bureau and create some other opportunities for officers here that aren't necessarily supervisory opportunities, but opportunity to do some other things that I think really can be a benefit to the town.
Thank you, Chief.
Other questions for police? All right. Well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
appreciate you coming and explaining it directly to us.
Thank you.
All right. So we hadn't had it on our agenda, but because I don't think we thought Mary would have the write-up for her proposed position. I guess what I would do is ask folks, you should have received her write-up. B, did everyone have a chance to read it? And I guess that's a preliminary question to, would we want to try to review that along with all the other positions that we've discussed this afternoon, move on and talk about the position in the town manager's budget. Anybody have an issue with discussing it now, or do you need time to review it and discuss it later, I guess is my question for you.
It's being transparent. I did review it, but I did not digest it as much as the fire and police chief's memos because it wasn't on the agenda, Jim.
Right.
So can I discuss it? Absolutely, but I don't feel as prepared as I was for the other two presentations.
So, and I think probably maybe that's a good point, Rich. I don't have it on the agenda for discussing that position. And maybe other members may be in the same position that you're in. So maybe we defer it, Mary. Thank you for sending it to us, but our next one is capital projects, and perhaps what we could do is either allocate a certain period of time, either right at the beginning of the meeting and ask for the others to come in later, or allocate a time after our discussion on capital projects, assuming there's a sufficient time remaining, to discuss that position in the town manager's budget. But my vote would be, are there any disagreements with waiting until our next meeting to talk about the position? Okay. Then maybe what I would propose is let's get it posted for next week as after the discussion with capital projects. Because I don't think we've already invited those folks to come at 1:30, and I don't want to mess that up. But let's get it on so that, assuming we have sufficient time, we have it on the agenda and we can review it. If for some reason we don't get a chance to, we get another chance after that with the DPW and IT. Rich.
Just a segue. In the minutes, I had two notes that we were going to do a follow-up on. Now, if I missed it, I apologize. Steve was gonna follow up on the 27% decrease in the non-salary account with Jeannie. And Mary was gonna tell us about what happened with the veteran services discussion. I don't know if I might.
Good catch, good catch.
I thank you for that. I don't know if is anyone prepared to report on that?
I can give you an update on veterans. Steve, did the clerk's budget, was that addressed in your memo? I thought it was.
It was the first item,
And just one moment before we
but I can repeat it, so.
before we start on that discussion. Mike, you had a question and wanted to just double check before we begin the discussion about those follow-up items.
Thank you, Jim. While we're talking about next week's schedule, I believe we're starting off with capital. And just wanted to confirm with you that is IT and DPW going to be scheduled as well on that next week's agenda?
No, that's the 29th.
Specifically about their budgets, we're earmarking April 29th, Mike, as reviewing the DPW budget and the IT budget. I think the theory was present the capital projects so that if there are follow-up questions, we get a chance to ask them of DPW and IT, who make up a big portion of the capital projects list.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Yep. So thank you. I think, Mary, that's right. You were going into a meeting right after our financial oversight meeting last week. So how'd it go?
Well, guess where I'm going right after this meeting? The same people, but
That's like too much fun.
no, it's Zoom fatigue is now the new expression. On Tuesday night of this week, however, the Munson Select Board voted to depart the district, leaving 3 communities. Munson contributes 22% to the annual budget. East Long Meadow contributes 56%, and Wales and Hamden together are the difference. So my conversation this afternoon is going to be twofold. I really have to give some thought to whether East Long Meadow stays in the district or how the budget will be reallocated for fiscal 22 in the light of the Munson board decision to leave the district. So nothing's been resolved. It seems to get a little worse with each passing week. So if you, maybe I can follow up further at our next meeting.
Yes,
Certainly impact our budget, because we're at, as I said, we are currently at 56, almost 57% of the budget.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Chris.
I just have a question for Mary. Is there a specific timeline that if East Long Meadow chose not to continue in the Veterans District, that it would have to be done by the council by X amount of time? Or
yes, 60-day notice for in advance of the next fiscal year. So May 1st is our deadline.
Oh, boy.
And the decision isn't so much the hard part. I think it's more, if the decision is to get out of the district, then what do we do about our veteran services going forward? That's complicated. And
Yeah.
so, but yes, it's 60 days, which would be May 1st.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead. If you have follow-up, go.
Are there any other of our neighboring communities that have formed a district, or are they all standalone on their veterans services, say Wilbraham, Long Meadow, et cetera?
Well, Wilbraham and Long Meadow are standalone.
They are.
Yeah, and I don't know what Palmer's doing. I don't know what Munson will do. Maybe there's an opportunity for us with Munson, but again, I'd like us to be in a district rather than foot the whole bill for a veteran service officer, but I just have to discuss it with the remaining parties and see where we can go.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Tom.
Mary,
Yes.
with regards to the veterans position, if I recall correctly, they have an office here in town. Do they have shared offices in other of our other municipality members?
They have an office in town that has not been occupied by the service officer for 18 months. He goes to Munson, and that's part of my dissatisfaction. East Long Meadow veteran families seeking services are asked to go to Munson to get information, and I'm not happy with that. But now that Munson's vacated the district, their office space, which they had donated for those services, will no longer be available. And so that creates a physical problem as to where the veterans officer will physically place himself for any office hours. But yeah, in our Council on Aging building, there's a small room near the media room that was the office. It is still the office for the veteran service.
Yeah, so a follow-up question. So we're paying 56, 57% of the district budget, and that veterans officer doesn't even have a location in our town. I mean, it would seem that would be the other way around.
Well, the percentage of contribution is based on land value, not on anything else, as I understand it. So, and the lack of a presence in East Long Meadow is more a personnel issue, I think, than a district agreement issue, because the district expects a presence in each community as well. So those are some of the issues that I'm trying to work through.
Okay,
Thank you, Mary.
thank you.
Rich, you noted one other follow-up item?
I apologize. Steve said he already sent that out. I must have missed it, Steve. I apologize.
I can go through it again anyways, Rich. Basically, I went and talked to Jeannie about the decrease, and it was due to the E-code project. Sarah Menard directed that was a budget line item to put it in, to put it against. And they're coming to the point now where they're at the end of the project and they don't need as much money to get it going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
And Rich, I'll resend, I may have your wrong email address that you corrected last time, so I'll resend that out to you.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Steve.
So just a few other items to kind of go over. We've gotten some additional information. The schools, Gordon sent out an additional spreadsheet or two that's actually seems more in line with what was submitted last year. That came in and I shared it out earlier today, so you might not have seen that yet. But I just wanted to call it to your attention. Also, Chris has been keeping me updated on reports related to federal funding that's being allocated to East Long Meadow, and the numbers are pretty high. Chris, I don't know, did you send that only to me or?
Yes, I only sent it to you. And at your discretion,
Okay.
you want to share.
I think I'll probably share it out. I've been keeping a little summary sheet, and I'm not exactly sure what it means, but I'd like to find out what it means, not only for the town, but for the schools in terms of, because there are millions of dollars noted there. So
Yes.
we'll need to just understand. I assume any dollars are, to our benefits, just how it might be able to be used. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, one notation on the, I don't know if you were able to print that Excel spreadsheet, but on the spreadsheet, there's a difference between allocated, what they call allocated and what they call claimed.
Right.
Allocated means the potential, and claimed is what's actually been paid. So I think that notation, when you send that out, would be important.
Sure. And then I had noted earlier with our discussion with Steve that Mary had shared with me the management letter from the FY20 audit. Mary, I didn't know whether that was anything that is that something that is shareable to the committee, or is that is there? Would you rather?
Yes, I answered that email, Jim. I said yes, but you maybe didn't have a chance to.
Yeah, I didn't pick it up. Okay.
Yeah, no problem with that.
Yeah, and you'll get a sense. Really, I think the way I explained it, there was nothing material found, which is that's the key thing. And then there's observations, which are things that if you let go unaddressed will eventually make their way to material issues. But it seems like everything is being addressed. But so I'd like to share it out, and I will do so. So we have Mary's write-up on the grants administrator, so we'll look at that in preparation for our next meeting. Other information, any other information folks think we need at this time? Yes, Tom.
I'm still unclear. From a few meetings ago, we had a discussion, and at least in my mind, it wasn't resolved, having to do with what's the actual budget and what's the potential increase in taxation due to that. And I want to make sure we have that information before we start to move forward with regarding these potential new positions, approvals, or the capital budgets. I'd like to know what number we're starting at. Not that I like starting at the top and working down. I'd rather start from the bottom working up, but we had a potential number that we were working with.
Can I try to help with that? If I understand the question, all the new positions that you just heard about, including mine, which you haven't heard about, are included in that budget that you have for your consideration. So they're already in there, and it came out to a 23-cent increase.
So that's my understanding too, Tom, is that the summary that we went over and the projected tax rate, et cetera, was including all of that information or all of those items. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And the good news is the legislative budget that was offered yesterday has not been approved, but it does increase the Chapter 70 funding and the general unrestricted state aid. However, the specific amounts that may benefit East Long Meadow are still undetermined. It's just a lump sum that the legislature has exceeded the governor's recommendation. So when those numbers come out, if they're favorable, it will obviously increase our revenue side of things. But other than that, the numbers that you have are pretty firm at this point.
So
I'm sorry, Jim, I keep interrupting you, but there is one item on the capital that should be omitted.
all right.
I know
Right.
you were in our audience at council the other night, but for next week, that network upgrade of 200,000 is no longer going to be on the capital recommendation for this year because our system failed, as you heard at the meeting. And so we've gone ahead and ordered the new hardware to upgrade the network. And so that $200,000 project will no longer be part of the capital request.
Is that being taken out of stabilization or out of free cash, Mary?
No, neither at the moment. We're hopeful that between our reserves and our fiscal discretion this year, that we may have enough based on turnbacks to cover that expense out of just the general operating money. But we'll know for sure within the next, say, 2 weeks to a month, in which case then Steve would prepare a motion and we'd ask the council for a free cash transfer. But I don't think we're going to need that.
Okay. Thank you. That would be great if that could be done. Yes, Chris.
Just a question. Do you have a preference on whether to take it from free cash or stabilization? Stabilization is certainly for emergencies, and having watched the council meeting, it certainly sounded like an emergency to me.
Oh, it's an emergency, all right.
Or, rather than reduce the free cash.
Well, we think our free cash is going to be replenished soon when we do the ban. Steve, you can elaborate on this, but our free cash last year took a hit of $800,000 because of a lack of bonding for a project that had gone through and was completed. So when the state was calculating our free cash under our recap, we sustained that loss, so to speak. That will be replenished. So I think our free cash is pretty solid. Steve, can you give a better answer than that?
Sure. Mary's absolutely correct. When we, each year, as you probably know, part of the free cash calculation is any deficits in the town's accounts. And they deduct it off the free cash. The 800,000 was a big hit. In total, I think it was about 950,000 with everybody, all the ones combined. Part of the reason we want to do the band is to make sure that we don't have that issue again this year. And the part of the calculation that they give is they say they hit us last year for the deficits. So this year, when we go to do 21's free cash, what they'll do is they'll add that back in and then go through all the deficits and take the hit of the deficits at the end of 21. So we're getting it all back. So we're kind of in essence starting with roughly $1 million in free cash, all things being equal right now. And then that'll be whittled back and forth depending on what they add and subtract out of there. But we are starting off in a good position with that. I agree with Mary. I think that right now anyways, based on what I'm seeing, that we should be able to handle this without dipping into reserves. And even the free cash, because I think we'll just be able to do it with with the fiscal prudence that we've used so far.
But this just happened, Chris. It was just over the weekend, so
Yeah.
it's still kind of raw, and we just have to figure that out and have a little bit more conversation about it. So, I mean, I'm not saying absolutely we're not going to ask for a transfer, but I'm hopeful that we won't have to.
Okay, at your discretion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And just following up, has the public hearing for the town budget, has that been scheduled? Or I know the school is scheduled for April 26th.
The town is 527.
Well, I haven't seen an agenda for that. My plan was to give the final budget on at the meeting on the 27th. So I suspect that Jeannie's office will deal with that, with the scheduling of that.
So are you thinking that the night in the meeting that you present your final budget would also be the public hearing for the budget?
No.
Well,
May 11th.
We don't have time for that.
Hey, Kathy?
My recollection, if you look back in the minutes, is Mike said it for our May 11 meeting.
Right.
Okay,
Exactly. In the
that
minutes,
makes
yeah.
more sense.
All right, so May 11th is the public hearing. Okay. Sorry, that was my confusion. But I guess I'm glad I asked. Okay, and then just to recap, next week we have capital projects and Mary's position. The 29th we have DPW and IT. And then on the May 6th, we have the schools. What I would say, if you have any particular questions that you have, it might be worthwhile to make it as efficient as possible when we talk to the schools for you to forward them to me. And at some point, what I would do is put those together and send them in advance to the schools so that they have a chance to prepare at least those parts, and we can make that a productive discussion. So when you have a chance, just forward those to me. So May 12th is a meeting that we added to our schedule, which is hopefully when we have a chance to kind of follow up on everything, see where we stand. If we're able to take preliminary votes on our recommendations or make our recommendations. Thursday, we still have our meeting scheduled, which would again be hopefully where we might be in a position to make our final recommendations. So that's, and then we have our 520 and 527, which I would say let's keep on our schedules, but hopefully we'll have completed what we need to do, and we may need to meet about our presentation, but hopefully we'll have settled on our recommendations by the 13th. Yes, Rich.
You mentioned May 12th as a meeting. Did you mean May 13th?
No. Oh,
Well,
May 13th, right?
I had written in, and I
We have
apologize, but
I'm sorry to jump in, but
go ahead, Ken.
we added May 12th as an additional one, so we had back-to-back days to get, last minute loose ends tied up.
Thank you, sorry, got it, thank you.
Jim,
Yep,
could I ask
yep.
the same scheduling question? Because I'm just kind of confused. Seems to be a permanent state of mind these days, but
I'll get you, Mike, right after. Yeah, go ahead.
so I'm going to submit my final budget to the council at their meeting on April 27th. So I'm not going to have the benefit of any of the finance oversight's final decisions, right?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, because I keep telling myself that the next submission I make to the council should be, well, it will be, it's called the final, and it will be, but it won't have the benefit of all these discussions, because you won't have decided then about the positions, for example, or or anything.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Kathy.
Well, this is how I see it. Yes, when you submit yours, Mary, that's how you finally see it, for using the word final. And the committee will still have a couple of meetings to tweak out what we would recommend to the council. But the fact remains that the committee's recommendation is simply that, and the council could override or disagree with various parts of either your final budget or this committee's recommendation. So you don't really know till that last night when the council takes a vote.
I guess I was hopeful that by virtue of this exchange of information and questions and so forth, that I would be able to incorporate some agreements that we may make, or that I may decide to change as a result of your commentary and your input, and then make that quote unquote final budget different from the draft. Because as I sit here today, it feels like I can just reproduce what I gave you in the draft, because nothing has changed on the revenue side. Nothing's going to change on the revenue side. I'm not going to have the legislature's numbers, and you're not going to have decisions yet on the cuts you might make. So it just feels like there's a bunch of weeks going by that we're working hard at getting a product, and then we're not going to, but the deadlines that are imposed are not going to allow us to take advantage of this.
Yeah, I do have a comment on that, Mary, but before I do that, Mike, you had something you wanted to say?
I did. Kind of coincides a little bit of Mary's conversation and Kathy's. The way I see it playing out right now, Mary was submitting on the 27th. We still have IT and DPW with budget finance on the 29th, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so from there, then we bring the school in on the 6th for budget.
Correct.
And we have I was preliminary planning with Jeannie for our public hearing on May 11th. And then we reserved for budget finance the 12th and 13th.
Right.
Correct.
We're all on the same page there, and I'm comfortable with what we have so far laid out.
So let me go back to your comment, Mary, and I guess I'll open this question up to the members of the committee, because it seems to me, Chris, either last year or the year before, we might have proceeded a little bit differently than what we've done so far. And I think what we had done at one time is where we didn't have an issue, we made our votes on budgets and then moved forward. And I guess in carrying that forward, thinking about this year, theoretically, we could make decisions on pieces of this budget individually, so that, so we've listened to the chief of fire, of police, we listened to Steve. We're probably not going to get a lot more information than what we received. So another way to approach this, rather than waiting till May 12th to take a vote on every single thing, is to take a vote as we go along. Yes, Chris, you look like you were going to say something.
Let's face it, last year was a very unusual year. It was also Mary's first year, I believe, formulating a budget on her own, in the absence of a support person, the finance director. So we did work hand in hand. However, I see our chore, because we're appointed by the town council, that we are working for the town council. And we are cooperating with the town manager, which is important. But I think if we, on the 12th, I think what's really important is hearing public opinion, which I think you will hear on May 11th. Up to date, they've seen Mary's preliminary budget, which is on the website, I believe. And I don't know if the comments have been received, but I think it's important for our committee to hear those comments, because they may affect things like capital project or new positions. So I would suggest that, like on the 12th, we start going through and saying, as we did last year, department by department, yes, this looks fine, this looks fine, this looks fine, and have our vote.
Okay.
And then on the 13th, kind of wrap it up, because by then we'll have more answers than we have at this moment in time. And Mary's right, we won't have the numbers from the state. This is what the House proposed currently, which they want a sizable, I think it's a 3.9% increase. However, it has to go to the Senate, and then it goes to the conference committee. So we probably won't know any of these numbers until the month of June, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
So I think if we proceed in that manner, I think that's the best way to go.
All right. Kathy, you're nodding your head.
Yep.
Yeah, that's yes when you're muted.
All right.
Yes.
I would agree with Chris.
All right.
Yeah, I do too. I agree with Chris.
All right. So,
Jim, I just feel like, everybody tells me we have to be collegial. Well, this is creating a situation where it looks like, okay, well, the town manager did what she did with no benefit of input, truly, in a very concrete sense. Chris is absolutely right. The function of this committee is to make recommendations to the council, but I would likely agree with much, if not all, of the suggestions you make, and then incorporate them, and then have one final product that looks like we collaborated, which we do and are doing. But the process is just somewhat stilted. I find it somewhat awkward that the timing of things doesn't lend itself to a contributory.
I think, Mary, the charter has these specific steps and timeframes that are built in, which kind of force these kind of steps. I mean, I do believe that everything has been collegial, and I doubt we're going to have a lot of disagreements. It's just the timing is such that it, if it said we work with you to put your budget together to recommend to the town council, then it would work an entirely different way too. So I understand what you're saying, and I hope we'll get that across when we do our presentation.
I appreciate that, Jim. Thank you. Thanks all of you.
And it's 3 o'clock, so I don't want to keep you beyond our time, but if we have time next week, I'd like to make sure at some point we talk about what we want to develop for our presentation of recommendations to the town council. In the past, we've had a package that kind of mirrors the draft budget and just highlights the changes, and then also, goes through projected reserves and reserves as a percentage of operating budget, et cetera. So I'd like to, have that discussion. I won't try to do it now because we're past our time, but either in the next meeting or the meeting after that at the very latest, so we can begin to kind of prepare that for when we do have our recommendations finalized. So with that, I would ask if there's any other issues or questions that we should address this afternoon.
Be kind when you get my notes.
We're very kind. And which reminds me,
Oh, not me again.
no, Tom was kind enough to start off as our first minute taker, but he will not be able to attend our meeting next week. So I'm wondering, Chris, would you be willing to go for a second shot? Okay.
Of course.
Everyone's doing a fantastic job. You're doing a marvelous job on these minutes. Any other questions for this afternoon? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Kathy, and
Yes.
who's the second?
Tom.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call. Kathy,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Jim, yes. Rick, we're officially adjourned. Rich, did that mean you had your was it a plumber that you
Gotta
were
leave and get some parts, so I'm really in trouble. I'm getting my checkbook out.
with? All right. Well, we thank you for doing that for us. All right.
Rick,
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
And we'll be on the docket for next week. And obviously, if there's any questions, please feel free to get hold of me in the meantime.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you. Take
Thank you.
care.
Thanks, Don.